And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Radio Network here at coalitionradionetwork.com. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course, well, our new mothership at coalitionradionetwork.com. A little editorial note for those who might be listening to this for the very first time. My name is Pat Ford, and I am chairman of the Rhode Island Libertarian Party and also a member of the LNC. I want to make it very clear that this broadcasting effort is independent of the Libertarian Party of Rhode Island or the Libertarian Party nationally. That being said, we've been on the air for about 7 years, and we dedicate probably about 60 to 70% of our time advocating for liberty, advocating for the free market, advocating for body autonomy, self-ownership, and of course, every aspect of the liberty movement. We are unapologetically libertarian here. With regard to the presidential election, I felt it appropriate as a member of the LNC to stay, well, neutral. Call me Switzerland. I want folks to know that now and, well, really forever, but particularly through the November campaign, that this platform exists for the benefit of the party and the benefit of the liberty movement. Down ballot candidates, national candidates, if you're looking for a forum, a platform to express your thoughts, to have a conversation, you are welcome here. Regardless of caucus, regardless of orientation, regardless of platform, the door is always open. So let's launch into tonight. It is with great pleasure that I reintroduce someone to whom I have a great deal of personal admiration. I first met Judge Jim Gray, virtually, if you will, over the radio. And for those of you who are a little younger, real AM radio, when he was involved with an organization called LEAP, which at that point in time was called Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. Judge Gray has and always will be one of the leading voices of the movement to finally end the war on drugs, and to bring rationality, sensibility, humanity back to our law enforcement system here in this country. Whenever I've had Judge Gray on the show, I've always made a point of admiring him for his courage and his tenacity. It's a lot easier to be against the war on drugs than it was, say, 7, 8, 10 years ago, particularly if you held a position anywhere in the judicial world. Even more so if you sat on the bench as a judge. And regardless of the outcome of this election, to which I wish all libertarians Godspeed, I will always hold Judge Gray the highest level of admiration. Joining us tonight is also another warrior for liberty. Larry Sharpe is running for the vice presidential nomination for the Libertarian Party. I first got to know Larry a few years back when in our first, actually really our second, but our first big convention back here after a group of diehard liberty types turned the lights back on at the Liberty Party. His speech that afternoon has sat with me really for years now. And I have used his approach to plant a seed, not an argument, countless times as I've been literally everywhere on the libertarian and the liberty landscape. It's powerful words and a powerful philosophy, and particularly after the events of this past week, we could all do well to think about, well, how would Larry have handled some of these situations? Tonight's purpose is to ask, well, the candidates anything. This is a wonderful opportunity for folks in LNC Region 8, my region, New York, New Jersey, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, to reach out with a question. I have never seen either of these gentlemen shirk away, well, from a conversation about anything. So let's get started. Gentlemen, welcome to the Coalition. Thank you for joining me tonight.
Well, Pat, thank you for that generous introduction of us both. It certainly applies to Larry, and I will bow to that as well. I think the idea of an AMA, ask me anything, is exactly what libertarians stand for. I prove all the time I don't have all the answers. I don't purport to, but I will talk about issues. If I'm found not to be exactly on point, then I'm a judge. I'm trained to listen. I'm trained to consider, trained to make decisions. So this is really helpful for everybody. There is nothing that we should not be able to discuss without yelling at each other, calling each other names, anything. And it's a pleasure to be with you and to be with your people in the great Northeast.
Excellent. Now, if folks would like to send us questions, the email address is pford, P-F-O-R-D, at coalitionradio.us. Spelled exactly how it sounds. No dashes, no hyphens, no confusion. P-F-O-R-D at coalitionradio.us. Now, for purpose of this, I will keep, I believe, the folks who've asked the questions anonymous, and we're asking folks who are delegates to the Libertarian National Convention to really lead off with questions. Because tonight's purpose is not only, well, it's to educate everyone about where the Gray Sharpe team stands on the issues, but in particular, as we get towards Memorial Day weekend, as we close in on that fateful day when we will choose our next nominee, this is an opportune time for delegates to really either rethink a decision they may have made months ago, and the landscape has changed so dramatically on so many different levels and so many issues, morally, philosophically, certainly economically, the power of government certainly being a daily part of the national conversation in a manner which I don't think I've seen it in my lifetime. So let's lead off then. I guess we're just going to toss a question out to both of you. Feel free, both of you, to jump in. So, a question for Messrs. Gray and Sharpe. Are there any planks in the platform with which you disagree? If so, how would you amend that plank?
No, Pat, I think that I agree with them. The question is, I think that all of us in the race have the same values, have the same goals, have the same principles. I think where we part company is how we wish to get there, the best way of getting there. Getting rid of taxes. I'd love to get rid of taxes. It's not going to happen this pandemic. Taxes are here to stay for a while. So let's show people how it can be done better, how we can get away from those sorts of things. And then they will be willing to go further. Education, just all of these things that we have a better way and we will get there. So from this election, I think delegates should ask, or all voters should ask, what is it that you want from this election? And boy, I can tell you what I want, and Larry is here, and we sometimes disagree. I think most of the time we're together, but if we do disagree, we say so. But I think that we want to move our party forward. I want to mainstream the word libertarian. I want people, when they think the word libertarian, to think freedom, to think a better way, because it is. And I want us to help our down ballot candidates. We elect more people. We're a political party, not a philosophy, not a philosophical debate society. We are a political party. We help our down ballot candidates. So we will have more members of the city council and the water district and the assembly and the rest. That's how we are addressing this election campaign. We're going to move the ball forward. Take it even a little bit farther. Ask any football coach, and most of the time, the team that gets the most first downs wins the game. You can throw Hail Mary passes if you want to, but most of the time it's not successful. I want to win the game. I want to move that ball down the field, take small steps if we have to, then there'll be larger steps. More and more people will join the party, will understand, hey, libertarians will help me with whatever it is that I want. I want better education for my students, for my children. I want better health care. I want world peace. I want the deficit to be reduced and obliterated. That's the sort of thing that I think Gray Sharpe 2020 is pursuing, and daggone it anyway, I think that's what we're going to achieve. Larry, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the judge has been very clear on where he stands, and I'm with him. The idea is, of course, we agree with the platform. The question is, do we want to achieve that tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, as fast as we can? Right now, the country is running the opposite way of the plank. We want the country to run towards the plank, and if we can make that happen, I think we're rocking and rolling.
Excellent. One editorial note, I am not here, by the way, to debate or interject any additional follow-up questions or conversation. The purpose of tonight is to take questions directly from delegates in Region 8. Next question.
So I can insult you if I want, Pat, you can't insult back?
No, I am. Remember.
Pat, we give you dispensation. We give you dispensation. You don't have to take anything lying down. Not that you would anyway.
Cloaked in this rather solemn Rhode Island, New England exterior is a Jersey kid who spent his entire youth on the wrong side of the Holland Tunnel. And by the way, I'll just leave that at that. How would your administration handle diplomacy with Lieberland?
Like any other country, I was the chair of the World Affairs Council of Orange County here in California for a while. And one time we had two representatives. One was the consul general from Germany. The other was the consul general from India. And we were sharing a glass of wine before the program started. And I said, okay, consul general, tell me, what is your view of the United States government? And he said, oh, we're friends and oh, this and oh, that. And I said, okay, I understand. That's the party line. Tell me how you really feel. And I'm not going to mention which administration was in effect at the time. And the guy from the consul general from Germany looked at me and said, you know, you treat us like children. We're not your partners. You basically dictate to us how it will be. And we chafe at that. And the consul general from India said the same thing. We're going to be partners. We're going to talk directly with people. Of course, you know, Ronald Reagan, trust but verify. And boy, I sure go along with that. But we're going to deal directly with people, officially, unofficially, orally, in writing, publicly, privately, but we're going to treat them as parties, and they have a point of view. I mean, look, India's been around for what, 2,000 or 3,000 years. Maybe they have something to say. Maybe we should listen. So that's the way we're going to treat Lieberland, as well as Brazil, as well as Argentina, as well as Monaco. That's our approach.
Candidate Sharpe, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, Lieberland's smaller than Monaco. So Lieberland's about as big as what, 4 blocks in Queens, give or take, something like that. I forgot. It's tiny. I think what the judge is trying to say is that we have the rest of the world to worry about also, right? And clearly some people are going to be unhappy about Lieberland existing and not existing and whatever the case may be. And we're going to have to talk to all of them. We have to talk to all of them. That's what the judge is saying. We have to talk to everybody. And if that will make some people unhappy, we'll hopefully negotiate that and make them more happy, or at least neutral. We have to make sure that we try to recognize the value of every country, no matter how big or how small it may be.
Our next question. Excluding books by 20th century and present-day libertarian philosophers, what is one book that you would recommend and why? Candidate Gray. Well,
you know, I go back to Austrian economics, even Murray Rothbard. I can't remember when he was there, but there's a tradition building up. Gosh, you take away this century. I mean, I'd go with Ayn Rand also, but she's in this century. But I'd go back to Murray Rothbard, to people of that ilk.
Candidate Sharpe, your thoughts?
Bastiat, the law, 1850s, I think. Am I about right in that area? 18 something. I think 50s. Might be 30s, but I think 1850s. I'd go Bastiat.
My problem is, Pat, I'm so enamored with Milton Friedman, it's hard for me to make the leap backwards.
Here's a question near and dear to my heart. If you get the presidential nomination, how do you intend to help down-ballot libertarian candidates running in ballot access retention races?
Pat, this is Mr. Libertarian. Larry Sharpe and I have been doing this for years. You know, I've been a libertarian for 18 years, so Larry for ever since 2012. We have a record of assisting down ballot candidates. It's a critically important thing. And another thing we're going to do is we're going to present a campaign that they would be proud to show to their friends, to their neighbors, to their family. That was something that we're not going to make people mad. We're not going to scare people. We're going to inspire people. We're going to show them that the libertarian way simply is the right way to go for the benefit of everyone. Not all candidates would do that. We are. So we're going to assist those down ballot candidates, both from the top as well as hand in hand.
Candidate Sharpe, your thoughts?
Yeah, one of the reasons why I came aboard to back the judge is he mentioned that as one of his issues. He was very, very forward about saying that we have to grow the down ticket. He had mentioned it more than once to me. He talked about the idea of being able to, make sure that others could look to us as an example. He had told me many times, yes, absolutely, I'm totally on board. We have to be able to do two things. One, be the example the judge has set, And two, I've seen the judge multiple times out in different places. I've seen him out in, everybody knows that I've been running around conventions. I've seen the judge there too, right? Running out there, helping people out, giving advice, showing them how to talk. One of his issues has always been education all the time, right? So yeah, I think we're going to keep doing what we do. Having the nomination gives us more gravitas in the mainstream media. Having the nomination means more people who are outside of the Libertarian Party will hear us and want to see us. And then we'll bring, as we always have, we'll bring everybody along as we can. And hopefully we'll have the longest coattails we can possibly have.
Wonderful.
Let me add to that for a moment.
Go right ahead, Judge.
I've spoken to several ballot candidates, and how do we describe ourselves? And some say we're fiscally conservative and socially liberal. And I say, don't do that. I understand what you're saying, and I agree with it, but fiscal sounds egghead, and conservative, you're going to alienate the liberals. No, we're financially responsible. Oh yeah, that's me too. And we're socially accepting. So we are classic conservatives, we are classic liberals, but it's the way you address it as well. Just for practical sake, why alienate people unnecessarily? You want them to identify with you. We're financially responsible, we're socially accepting. It's just terminology, but we help with that.
Excellent. Jim and Larry, you both have a bunch of great ideas. What would the first 90 days look like in a Gray Sharpe administration?
Oh, me. Pat, I think the first thing we need to do is to shine a light on what's going on in the federal government. And the first thing that I would emphasize to our people is we're going to audit the federal government, the agencies. We'll have sunset provisions. So we will bring in each agency, I don't know, every 5 years, whatever, and show publicly, hopefully it'd be on C-SPAN with Congress, make them show what they have accomplished for the last 5 years, what their goals were, how much money they spent, and then what they expect in the next 5 years. What are your plans? What are your goals? What is your proposed budget? So we could all see, well, wait a minute. That agency was brought in the New Deal. You can argue whether it was good or not at the time, but you still think we need that in the year 2020 or 2021? So we'll reduce it. This is duplicative. No, we don't need to do that also. So Jewish will naturally prune back all of these agencies, more lean and mean, less out of our lives, as we say. And so we'll shine that light. We'll also try to go over the heads of Congress, if we need to get a line item veto. That goes back to Ronald Reagan, but it's true. The politicians throw in all of this booty, all of this expenses, all of these programs that they have that are unnecessary, and they attach it to some must pass legislation. No, the president should have the ability to say, we're not going to add that addition, we're not going to add this expense, etc. Other things, of course, we go with the war on drugs, the Controlled Substances Act. I will try to get that repealed. I don't know if I could get that done in the first 90 days, but what I could and will do is take marijuana completely off that schedule and allow each state to decide how best to protect and serve its people. But mostly we're going to fill our cabinet. We'll have a coalition government on merit with people certainly that are libertarians, independents, but also Republicans and Democrats, kind of like Abraham Lincoln's team of rivals, as long as they agree with our philosophy, again, of financial responsibility, live and let live, don't tread on me, well, don't tread on anybody, that sort of thing. Then when we have these political problems, this polarization, say, well, you're a Republican, you're a Democrat, go talk to your colleagues, get them on board, let's talk about this and work for America. We're going to be not only the unifying candidates for the Libertarian Party, but once elected, we're going to be the unifying administration for all Americans, showing them exactly how they will be bettered by our approach. That's a lot in 90 days, but this is our plan, and we're going to get into this.
Excellent. Larry, your thoughts?
So Larry, get to work, for heaven's sake. What are you doing sitting there? Let's get this going.
Start jumping through hoops. Yes, absolutely. So, well, there were several things the judge told me that I just loved when he said he talked already about the idea of auditing all of the agencies, but he also told me he was going to be thinking about how do we set priorities with enforcement, right? We can set the priorities of enforcement of certain laws and such immediately. We can begin to set the priority of enforcement, right? We can do that also, and also review all of our treaties and agreements and see which ones are we going to decide, which ones got to go, which ones do we need to start renegotiating, which ones do we have to get rid of, and start going through all of them. When do they expire? What are our requirements? I mean, these are all contracts. how do we deal with all those contracts, and when can we renegotiate them? Is there an out clause, right? Do we have these things? We have to. He's all about auditing all the agencies to include the Fed, auditing all of our treaties and agreements and seeing how we can deal with those, and setting enforcement. Even if we can't stop or end the law, we can set priorities on enforcement. And I'm on board, and I'll be helping.
Excellent.
And further, I mean, Larry's going to be busy, but also with regard, and it was Ron Paul that made these statistics, and I haven't followed it up, but I believe it. The United States of America has something on the order of 400 military reservations in other countries around the world. Now, we're going to audit each one. If they're necessary for our security, then we'll reinforce them maybe. But I'll bet you, Pat, that would take about 45 minutes to figure out that we really can do without about 300 of them and start closing them down. Like Larry says, we'll look at the treaties and see what we have to do. Treaties are contracts, even agreements are contracts, but we'll negotiate them down. We'll bring those troops home. And that's something high on my list as well. By the way, we need to have some foreign bases, I believe, because it is in our national interest to have freedom of the seas, to have free trade, and we should help do our part to keep those open. South China Sea, or wherever else, through the Straits of Hormuz, through the various canals, etc. These are things that are in our national interest. Free trade is important. We should do our part.
I've got a question specific.
Other than that, I have no opinion whatsoever.
Okay. I've got a question here specifically for Mr. Sharpe.
Uh-oh.
If Cuomo steals the Democratic nomination, how do you feel about getting a second shot at him?
That's an amazing question. In case you don't know, Cuomo is the governor who beat me in 2018, and who is the governor who now is destroying my state systematically. I mean,
Right.
One thing I'll give him, credit for. Boy, does he know how to destroy a state. He's really good at that. So he just systematically is devastating my state. So I would love to have a second crack at him. Absolutely, yes. I'm in. Let's do it.
This question
Bring
is
him
a little.
on. Pat, I'm sorry, but I saw a telecast where Governor Cuomo was talking and giving his speech about the pandemic and the rest. And boy, he just got double jointed and patting himself on the back the whole time. And it's just, he's trying to centrally plan our economy. So are these other governors and mayors. It flat out doesn't work. They're protecting themselves politically. And the more people that find out what he's actually done, the more Larry is going to want to take him on, and so is everyone else.
This is actually centered towards New York as well. Both feel free to jump in at the same time on this. Let's see if I can sort through the wording here. The federal government has effectively taken our healthcare system hostage. In doing so, they've created grotesque market inefficiencies. What impact do you feel that's had on the response to the COVID-19 corona crisis?
Devastating. Next question. It's just, no. We need to have your health care your way. I'm older than probably all of you to some degree. When I was growing up in the 50s and 60s, the United States had the best healthcare system in the world. And we had the situation where we didn't say that we don't have enough emergency rooms, healthcare is too expensive, none of that. But then the government starts getting involved. And anytime, and I defy anyone to respond to this question other than we would, anytime the government intrudes into the economy, education, healthcare, wherever, the prices go up invariably and the quality and services go down. That's what we've seen with regard to our nation's healthcare. And if we want to have our healthcare overseen by the equivalent of the Department of Motor Vehicles, that's exactly where we're going. It's demonstrable. No, we get the government out of healthcare. By the way, it's not in the Constitution whatsoever, but we do take care of people who cannot take care of themselves. So I would issue vouchers for people that on a sliding scale that can't afford to take care of that, so they can choose their own healthcare, and it'll be on a sliding scale. It brings the competition back. What happens then? Prices go down, quality goes up, and we get the government out of our healthcare as well as many other things.
Mr. Sharpe, your thoughts?
Yeah, again, I mean, I keep saying this, but it's true. It's why I love the judge. He's right. This is exactly what he's talking about. You look at the several things that made the COVID crisis us fail. Beds, masks, tests, ventilators, hand sanitizers, all these things. Every single one of these items that would have made things better, faster, safer for everybody, every single one of them was held back because of government regulation. How do you know that? The first thing they all did was, oh, let's get rid of this regulation. Let's get rid of that regulation. Well, why'd we have them in the first place, right? I live in New York City. I live in the belly of the beast. Elmhurst Hospital you heard about is walking distance from my house. I live in the belly of the beast. And you know what? I still say it. If we would have had more localized input, if we would have had less regulation, we would have been able to react faster. As the judge said, if we would have got the government out in the first place, things would have gone a whole lot better, a whole lot faster, and we wouldn't have required the heavy-handedness that actually happened.
Larry, the FDA obstructed testing. It goes on and on.
Mm-hmm. No, go right ahead. That's an important point.
Well, the FDA was a roadblock in front of testing. And finally, like Larry says, they finally decided to expedite it. Well, that just underscores the fact that the regulation should not be there in the first place. We will do everything we can, talk about the first 90 days, to start taking back those regulations, just getting rid of them, because people, the doctors, the private sector, the pharmaceutical companies should have the right to try. You know, the idea that the FDA is saying that they are going to choose for the safety and effectiveness of pharmaceuticals. Let's just talk about, we'll get rid of the safety part later, but let's just get rid of the effectiveness. That should be decided by the purchaser, by the people that are trying them, and just get the FDA. No one wants to have arsenic in your aspirin, but I eventually would do the same thing as the underwriter laboratories and do it privately. But at least the first part, let's get the FDA completely out of this effectiveness stuff. That'll prune them back about 9/10 and take away a lot of boondoggle bureaucracy.
This question is sort of dedicated at Mr. Sharpe as a New Yorker. For the second time in a generation, New York has sadly, tragically, taken the mantle of being "quote unquote" ground zero. Mm-hmm. Full disclosure, as a native of the New York metropolitan area, who for most of his life, one of the first things he saw every morning was in the distance, about 15 miles away, the World Trade Center. It's kind of an emotional question. Both events leading up to this are directly connected to the failure of large government. Do you have a prescription for this at this point? To codify what folks on the other side of the political spectrum say. Well, just let me jump in. They say, it's all about the children. And yet it's clear that in both cases, government has failed generations to come. Go ahead, buddy.
Yeah. First piece, New York City is often going to be ground zero. I don't think you get away from that. We are the largest city in the country by far. It's not even close. The second largest city is Los Angeles, and we are more than double Los Angeles. So we are going to be ground zero for many things. We have a population that 1/3 of our city isn't born in the country. Another 1/3 of our city isn't born in the city. No one else can say that. We are a mecca for talent. We are a mecca for every type of person you can imagine. My county, Queens, is the most diverse county in the nation. There is no way around us being ground zero. It's part of being who we are. So that's going to happen. The question is, how do we react to being ground zero? That's really the issue. And how do we make less ground zeros? And we already have a way of doing that. And it's our policy. And you know the policy, Pat. If you see something, say something. That's really what the policy that actually works. How do we know that? Since 9/11, we've adopted that, right? We've adopted the see something, say something. We've also adopted draconian soldiers who literally sit in our Grand Central Station, right? The soldiers have stopped exactly nobody, not one person ever. The TSA has stopped exactly nobody, not one person ever. The government side has done absolutely nothing but make our life miserable and make us feel unsafe, and it's terrible. But what has actually worked? The individual person who sees something and calls law enforcement and says, hey, this is the guy doing something. then law enforcement does its job, which I want them to do, and then they get the guy. How do I know that? How do we stop the Times Square bomber? It was somebody who was in New York. I believe he had a hot dog stand or something like that. He was also, by the way, a fellow Muslim, just to show that it isn't a religious or ethnic group. And he went, oh, he called the cops. This guy's got a bomb or something. The cops showed up and grabbed the guy. Yeah, amazing. We didn't require the TSA. We didn't require surveillance state. We didn't require bombing Yemen. We didn't require any of those things. A guy with a machine gun, none of that. All we required was, if you care about your city, and I do, which is why I'm still here, and if you care about your community, which more of us should, then we'll actually call each other and tell each other. As you add government, you by default remove community. And when you remove community, you remove the neighborhood watch, the real neighborhood watch, which actually works. When you add community, you can remove government. Our goal has to be to add community, remove government, and we will be safer. And ground zero, when it does happen, we'll be able to respond fast. And the best case is we'll have less ground zeros.
Judge Gray, do you want to add anything to that?
And you go beyond that, I'll just add, and I agree, of course, with Larry, but we don't need a TSA. You should allow the airlines to work out their own security. United Airlines, TWA, they're gone, but they don't want their planes falling out of the sky. They have a vested interest in being safe, but they're so much more effective than the government agencies. It just goes on and on. That we are a community, and we do embrace that. What Larry says is absolutely right, but the government just, they're expensive, they're cumbersome, they're bureaucratic, and they're ineffective in those things.
We've got a question from a delegate.
I was wondering, Pat, I was going to wait to see if Larry was also going to say that New York was a mecca for baseball players, but I didn't hear him say that, so I guess we're okay.
Don't forget, New York Yankees, 27 championship rings. So all you non-New Yorkers, all you Yankee haters, 27.
Would it be betraying my...
I'm not a Yankee hater, I'm a Yankee admirer, but I'm more for the underdog.
Would I be betraying my independent status here if I were to confess that I am, in fact, a lifelong fan of the greatest sports franchise ever brought to this earth, which is, of course, your and America's New York Yankees?
That's
Another
correct.
question.
Yes, Pat. You and I are now buddies. I said absolutely.
Another question from a
Pat, you're right. You're right. That is the best, most effective franchise in sports history. You're right.
Something about some New England Patriots. Here's a question to both of you. What do you think about Donald Rumsfeld?
You mean junior or senior?
I'll leave that up to both of you.
Well, I'm not going to comment on juniors. Senior did a pretty effective job, and I'm sorry, I don't even know if he's still living, but he was certainly an active part that I thought did a pretty decent job for the government. Mm-hmm. Other than that, I have nothing to say.
Okay. Let's look at our Constitution for a moment. Folks often point to different amendments being under fire. We're well aware of the attacks on your right to bear arms. We often talk about the First Amendment. In your opinion, out of all the amendments, which would you list as the most endangered? I'll throw that out to both of you.
I'm going to surprise you. I'm going to say it's the 10th Amendment, and I believe in all of them. But the 10th Amendment says that any power not delegated expressly by the Constitution to the federal government is reserved for whom? The states and the people. And that has been so thoroughly abused to our detriment that it's something that we should cry out and reverse. It's funny, Pat, but as a judge, I have an opportunity on occasion to swear people into different jobs, mostly in bar associations, things like that. And of course, they take the oath. I will protect and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. And so then I say, okay, now keep your hand up. Now swear you'll read it. And that gets a few chuckles from the audience, but it's true. Most people have not read the Constitution. That even extends to a lot of my fellow judges in reading their opinions. They've never read the 10th Amendment either. It is under attack. It's just it's been obliterated, and we've got to bring that back. of course, then the first and the second and the rest. But that's my answer to you.
I'd like to point out, too, someone who's been very actively involved in the Libertarian Party over the last couple of years is, of course, Michael Bolden of the 10th Amendment Center. And let's give those folks a shout out, because you're right. They are truly doing the work of the Lord. Larry, what are your thoughts? Is there a particular amendment that you find under attack or challenge right now?
I think the judge is right. 10th is a big deal. I've always had a personal issue with the first. My gut has always told me that the First Amendment is put there because without it, you don't have a country, right? Without it, there's no country. So I feel like the first, even if it gets touched, is a problem. I'm worried about that more than the rest, because if you lose the first, you can't fix the rest, right? If you lose the others, you can use the first to fix the rest. But if you lose the first, ball game's over.
Absolutely. Our next question has to do with, of course, the debt. Let me qualify this. What's astonishing in recent political history is how much our debt, our national debt, has become a political football. A few years ago, if you had told me that you would have out-of-control spending by a Republican administration with and engage in what could be called their own version of quantitative easing, in fact, essentially throwing debt concerns to the wind, the very same political party, of course, that made their bones with the Tea Party, opposing the Democratic administration's similar actions, if you will. What does the Gray-Sharpe administration plan to do about our national debt?
Well, first of all, Pat, I'm going to disagree with one of the premises of your question. It's not a political football. The Democrats and Republicans are fully as bad as each other. It's not even discussed. The Libertarians are the only ones that discuss it. I'm going to start by telling you something that I am proud to say. On April the 21st, I just became a grandfather. And on April 26th, I was the first time to be able to hold my little grandson, Hudson. And I looked at him and thought, what a miracle, what a miracle. But then I will tell you that the second thought I had was, okay, Hudson, you're $76,000 in debt, pay up. And every child that's born, every woman, child, man on this earth in the United States has a debt right now of $76,000, and it's only growing. It's only the libertarians that will call that alarm. How are we going to do this? First, by telling the truth. That this is the biggest national security threat to our country from my standpoint, and nobody's talking about it except the libertarians. Secondly, we're going to shine a light, like we said, on excessive spending, on the sunset provisions, on all of these. Again, go back to the line item veto. It is putting your children, your grandchildren's security at risk. We will call this alarm. We will do it openly, and then we are going through and showing how people are being cheated. That go back to Alexis de Tocqueville, remember him, Democracy in America, 1820. He said democracy is going to work until the elected officials discover that they can use the taxpayers or the people's money to buy their votes. And that's what we're doing blatantly. All of the political parties are doing. The Libertarians are the only political party that does not want to profit by being involved in government. Republicans, Libertarians, Republicans and Democrats and all other political parties except the Libertarians take that philosophy. We don't. And that's another reason why we can change this culture in our country to show libertarianism is really the only mainstream party in our country. It's a huge issue.
Larry.
Yeah, I mean, the judge mentioned, his grandchild, and that was a thing that moved me also, right? The idea of how do we do things that puts our future in debt? It's completely unfair. And then a judge says, always, we're going to do the audit. The audit's the part that I love. I've said it more than once. I just love that concept. When you start auditing everything, the most important piece isn't what the judge finds. It's what the press finds. It's what we put out into the light. It's making it transparent, right? That audit there's going to be 1, 2, 3, 20, whatever the number is, of reporters who want to make their bones on finding the corruption of this or the corruption of that, and whatever the case may be. And when all of a sudden a judge puts this out in the light and says, look, guys, come and get it. They are going to come and get it. And when they come and get it, the American people are going to see it and go, whoa, what are we doing? What are we doing? And when we get the actual American people on our side by changing the culture, like the judge keeps saying, that's when we actually change. The problem is most Americans are okay with this constant spending and debt. They're okay with it. They don't get it. When we show them how bad this is, when they show them what's happening, then they'll get it. They'll get on our side. We can make some real change.
Folks, if you're just joining us, we are engaged in, I think, one of the most unique new additions to the toolbox of democracy in recent generations. It's an AMA, Ask Me Anything. You've got the opportunity here to email me a question directly to Judge Jim Gray and Larry Sharpe, both candidates for the president and the vice presidential nomination for the Libertarian Party. I reflect back on all my years in politics and in quote-unquote public life, and the notion that we could reach out, the third largest party in America, and have these kind of intimate conversations digitally is astonishing. If you'd like to take advantage of this opportunity, please email me at pford@coalitionradio.us. Simple, P-F-O-R-D at coalitionradio.us. And these folks are not shy. They're answering everything.
And Pat, I would venture to say that you won't find Trump or Biden subjecting themselves to your toolbox of AMAs anytime soon or anytime at all.
Yeah, I think the last time the duopoly participated in anything like this was the infamous Jimmy Carter cardigan sweaters fireside chats. I think based on the results of that, I think that was the end, if you will, of that. You are actually listening and watching the Coalition Radio. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, and as always, outrage porn free. You can take a moment, if you're joining us for the first time tonight, if you could like or share any one of our profiles here on Facebook or Twitter, we'd be grateful. So let's jump right back into that. We've got a two-paragraph question here, but it's a great one from one of the delegates. So follow along. What will a Gray-Sharpe administration do about cronyism and corporate bailouts? I am a foreclosure paralegal with 10 years of fighting the banks. What I have seen is disgusting, and the CARE Act was a corporate bank bailout in disguise. Trump's administration relaxed enforcement of DOJ settlements. I had a client hurt by this directly. In my opinion, the too big to fail banks and the Fed are really the enemy of liberty. Wonderful question. Judge?
Don, that is probably the biggest softball question that could be thrown to us. My goodness sakes. Earlier, the Libertarian Party does not want to profit by being involved in government. And we're not going to give government bailouts to anybody. You go back to the 2008 crisis, the banking crisis, et cetera, caused by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, caused by government. Why? Because banks saw, well, if I loan you this money for a house, by the way, Congress said, oh, everybody should pursue the American dream of having a house. So you'd have one bank, say the Sharpe Bank, that would be honest. No, I'm sorry, you don't qualify. But then you'd come to the Gray Bank. Well, why not? I might as well give you this loan. I know you can't pay it back, but it's insured by the government, so I'll get my fees and costs back anyway. And then soon the shareholders for the Sharpe Bank say, well, look at the Gray Bank. They're making all this money. You should do that too. It's caused by government. So then they bail out one bank and don't bail out another. The Libertarians, Gray-Sharpe, will not bail out anybody, any companies. And you go then to this hideous situation with a $2.2 trillion bailouts now that the government caused so much of these problems by not being prepared and thwarting the recovery. And you remember, you've probably seen this, that the Kennedy Center in DC, which is a wonderful theater, they received, I can't remember, something like $15 million on this bailout. And somebody asked the question, why? Well, because they got hurt by being forced to be closed. True, but what about all the other theaters in the country? They got hurt too. Nothing. It's all cronyism, and the answer is no. Anytime you get the government involved in something like this, it's going to be arbitrary. Every single time, it's going to be arbitrary. Some will, the cronies, the favorites, and some won't, the rest of the people. It's not going to happen in a Gray-Sharpe administration. End of discussion.
Mr. Sharpe.
Judge said end discussion. We're good.
Okay, let me go on to the next question here. Your thoughts about the War Powers Act? That's the question.
A huge mistake that we have made as a country is not requiring Congress to follow the Constitution. Article 1, Section 8, only Congress can issue a declaration of war. Okay, you have the War Powers Act, you have these various other empowerment acts. Gray Sharpe, I am going to be the first president in the history of the United States of America to give back what has been accumulating as presidential power back to Congress, back to the states, back to the people. And so before we have our troops in battle for more than 60 days, hear ye, I love that phrase, hear ye, we will bring them home unless we get a declaration of war from Congress. Hugely important. We never would have gotten into Vietnam. We never would have gone into Iraq or Panama or all these other places, because then you take this to Congress. They're forced to answer questions, Pat. Who is the enemy? Where is the enemy? What is the security threat to our country? What is our goal? How will we know when we reached it so that we can have an end game and bring them home? Pat, we have fighting troops today in Afghanistan. They've been there for what, 18 years? What is the goal? What is the purpose for them being there? No one knows, because we never had a declaration of war. And besides then, had we gotten a declaration of war for Vietnam, for example, then the country would not have felt that they were lied to, that they were betrayed by being lied to by the government. They would have supported it had we done it. We never would have been able to do it. But had we done that, then there would have been support. That is a fundamental problem. Gray Sharpe will hand that responsibility back to Congress, as well as other presidential powers, to the states and the locals. Huge issue. Thanks for asking.
Larry, would you like to add on to that?
I'll just touch the piece that both the judge and I are veterans. And when you send troops into battle and you don't give them an actual endgame mission, and you don't give them a reason for why they're fighting, and you don't do that, you're betraying the veterans. You're actually breaking the contract. The oath that the judge and I both took was to defend and support the Constitution. And if you're doing something that's unconstitutional, you're betraying our trust, and you're betraying the trust of the veterans. So you have to do what the judge is saying just to be ethically correct with the contract you've made.
A great
Don, let me add to that too.
Mm-hmm.
Larry asked. I have a podcast, so I'm a little bit in competition with you, Coalition. It's called All Rise, The Libertarian Way with Judge Jim Gray. It's on the Voice America channel. And I try to accent, of course, the word libertarian. I had as a guest a very intelligent man. His name is Tom Campbell. He's been a 5-term member of Congress, as well as the Dean of the Haas School of Business at University of California, the Dean of the Law School at Chapman University. But he told me in my interview on our show that while he was in Congress, President Clinton was putting troops into Kosovo, and he inserted two resolutions into Congress at the same time. And I was aghast when he told us. The first one was, let's have a declaration of war for keeping our troops in Kosovo. And the second one was, if we don't have a declaration of war, let's bring these troops home. Members of Congress, the hierarchy of both he was a Republican at the time, both the Republican and Democratic parties came to him, the Speaker of the House, etc., saying, well, wait a minute, we are Republicans. We had our Vietnam. Let's give Clinton his Vietnam in Kosovo. And if he's successful, we can take credit. And if he's not successful, he'll get the political gain. All politics. And the Democrats came back and said, well, wait a minute, we let you go in Vietnam. You've got to give us a break here in Kosovo. It's appalling. It's sending people into harm's way, into battle areas where they are going to bleed and die or come back with their families and everything too, where, by the way, we have an enormous breach of contract with our veterans. Hope somebody asks a question about that. But this is politics. Instead of our security, it's an outrage. And we need to shine a light on that as well. It must be done correctly. We are much too much involved in sending our troops into battles all around the world. And that's got to stop, unless it's a threat to our safety, a threat to our security, a threat to our national interest, which will really bring it down. Article 1, Section 8, we're going to follow it.
An excellent segue here is a question from another delegate. Larry and Jim, do you feel that being veterans makes you more qualified to be commander-in-chief than our current president or Joe Biden?
The answer is yes. We have been there. We've seen this. I was awarded a combat action ribbon when I was in Vietnam. Um, to have people that have not been in the military sending our military troops into battle, they're losing out a great perspective, a great understanding of what they're doing. The direct answer to the question is yes, it does.
Larry?
I think it gives us different insight, just insight that non-veterans don't have. It doesn't mean that you can't be a good president if you're not a veteran. I'm not saying that, but I am saying it does give you an advantage. It does give you insight. And if you look, most of the people who are presidents who are all about getting into war, most of them aren't veterans. Most of the veteran presidents are about maybe we shouldn't be in this war because they understand the damage that is done to the individual soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen. We understand that, and we try to avoid that.
Here was a veteran. It's called President Dwight D. Eisenhower. I think he was a general before that. And remember when he left office, he warned us about the military-industrial complex. That's a lesson as well. That the military, we will pursue that exactly well too.
And might I add too, why
I think I was a veteran. I think Eisenhower was a veteran.
Yeah. Which, by the way, might be a reason why a significant number of our newer, younger libertarians are, in fact, veterans of a variety of the police actions that have taken, of course, literally around the planet and are occurring right now as we speak. Here's a question from a delegate. Get ready for this one, guys. What do you say to delegates who don't think you're libertarian enough to represent the party as our nominee?
I would be shocked. I almost don't know what to say. I have here, maybe you can see it. It is a leaflet from the Libertarian Party, published in 2019. It says on the front, what is the Libertarian Party? And on the back, it says, libertarians are practical. We know that we can't make the world perfect, but it can be better. Libertarians will keep working to create a better, freer society for everyone. That's what we are doing. As I said earlier, we may disagree with regard to how to accomplish our goals, our principles, and our attachments, but we are libertarians through and through. I would be shocked if somebody would think that by what I have done, even, by the way, and you mentioned this graciously in your introduction, holding a press conference as a sitting judge in 1992, telling people our nation's drug policy was not working and should be changed. That was a libertarian act. I would even go so far as to say that it displayed a little libertarian courage. It's the libertarian responsibility, liberty, that's what we do. We might disagree on how to best to get there. I think our way is the best, but I'd be shocked that anybody would even entertain the notion that Larry Sharpe and Judge Jim Gray are not complete libertarians. Libertarian heavy.
Okay. Here's another question. And let's lighten things up a little bit for a second here. In all of your activism in previous campaigns, of which there are many, to both of your credit, you have literally marched across this country. There's a saying here in Rhode Island, I think you can attest to, both of you have literally attended the opening of an envelope, okay, for libertarians around this country. But what is the oddest thing that you have seen at a state convention?
Oddest thing.
That you'd like to talk about.
The worst thing I have seen, the categorically worst thing I have seen was the striptease at the National Convention on C-SPAN or whatever it was. You know, I believe in liberty, I believe in sense of humor and the rest, but you know, some of the get-ups, that's fine. But the striptease was the oddest, was the most harmful thing. I'm trying to mainstream the word libertarian because we are in the mainstream, like I said before, and that set us back, reinforced all the negative stereotypes, which are mostly not true. But that was probably my answer to you. I'm deeply sorry that occurred.
Larry, anything you'd like to add to that one?
I'm going to go the opposite. The oddest thing I think I saw, maybe between one or two, state convention in Iowa. the state convention in Iowa that I've been to many of the state conventions, obviously, but they were so loving. And it sounds odd, but they were so loving and so together and almost no argument and just all on the same page and like, yes, we're all libertarians. It was almost kumbaya. I have said more than once, and some people get angry, Iowa was one of the best conventions I've ever been to because they were all just so, yeah, we're all libertarians, all good. Yeah, all good, all good. By the way, I'm a lifetime member of the Iowa State Party because of it. I was so happy. I don't live in Iowa, obviously. I was so impressed by the Iowa State Convention. So it's an odd thing because libertarians argue. Oh my God, do we argue all the time? And Iowa, we didn't. I loved it. That was odd, but great odd. I loved it. And I have my pin. I'm a lifetime member of the Iowa Libertarian Party.
Larry, there is something unnerving as a native of the New York metropolitan area about people being overtly nice to each other. I share
Yes, that's what I'm saying. I'm a New York City guy. Yes.
If someone's nice to you, if someone's nice to you, they have an angle usually.
Yes. Pat, let me add. A lot of people say, and I agree, that libertarianism is a loving approach. That if you respect other people, you respect yourself, you believe in responsibility, that's a loving act. That we are a loving group if you really come down to it. And I'm not surprised that you see it more in Iowa. But I always thought New York was a very loving area too. You never dispute anything there except your football teams, do you, Larry Sharpe?
Baseball too.
Yeah. Now listen, if you're a New York sports fan, you're first and foremost whatever baseball team or football club you choose to join, all right, and support.
Yes.
However, should the other team make it to the finals, you instantly adopt that other team, particularly if they're playing any team whatsoever from some city called Boston, which I refer to as
yes.
I refer to as New York's sort of sixth borough, kind of an outer borough of New York, a lovely spot.
Correct. You are either a New York fan or whoever's playing Boston fan. That's correct, yes.
Exactly.
Pat, I'm going to be diplomatic here. I think we should change the subject.
Okay, fair enough. You know, it's but again, it segues to a very important question. And it's interesting to see how these questions sort of fold into each other. I'm not reading them in an order. I've just kind of read them all and sort of see how we can do the flow of the conversation. Judge, you just pointed to I think, an analysis of, I think, one of the great challenges of being a libertarian. And I'd love to hear from both of you on this. Libertarians are often derided as being corporatist. Libertarians are often derided as being insensitive. Libertarians are often derided as being, quote unquote, immature and selfish. Again, like your experiences, Larry, and your experiences, Judge, I have found, despite our occasional moments, that nothing could be further from the truth. Speak to, if you will, the libertarian spirit of voluntarism.
Well, let's first start with the misconceptions, because one of the biggest ones came from Ayn Rand, and she wrote, "Greed is good," and that's a libertarian thing. Well, what she meant, and that's great for selling novels, but what she meant is, if you act, Pat, in your own economic self-interest, I do too, Larry does too, we all get together and good widgets are made, and people will buy and sell, and purchasers will control. That's what we mean. We have stereotypes that not only greed is good, but survival of the fittest, and uncaring, and no government at all, and smoking marijuana, which I've never smoked. So those are the things, like I say, we're trying to mainstream, put into the culture, mainstream libertarianism. Libertarians are caring people. We just talked about that. We need to, though, get out from under this idea that, oh, mommy government will take care of us. There was a really strong industrialist in our country who once said, anyone that feels that they can thrive by relying on the government should talk to the American Indian. I mean, that's really all you need to say. Government keeps people down. It does not allow them, gives them incentives to thrive, to live a better life, to improve themselves. Libertarianism does. Why? Because we care about people. I tell people, I was in the Peace Corps. I care about people. That's why I'm a libertarian. So it's just misguided. Again, the striptease didn't help much, but we just need to change that culture. If people understand who are our constituents, and change that culture, we will win this election. We will win this election.
Mr. Sharpe, your thoughts?
The judge is right. I mean, what he's saying is that we have this great, we do have this great volunteer spirit among us. The problem is, to the judge's credit, that it's been branded poorly. And I think sometimes we brand it poorly ourselves, right? We talk about don't tread on me. The judge says all the time, no, don't tread on anybody. And he's right. That's what we should be saying. Don't tread on me sounds selfish, even though it isn't, but it doesn't sound good. Saying don't tread on anybody sounds a whole lot better. I think we have to be better at getting out our message and saying it in a way that is loving, right? You've heard me say many times, Pat, I'm sure, the liberty movement isn't actually about liberty or freedom. It's actually about happiness. How do you get there? Through liberty and freedom. And if we actually realize that our movement is not about the means, but about the end, all of a sudden things change. And us as libertarians, we have to get that, communicate better. Is that what the judge is saying? Communicate better. But one more piece. I've done this before. I'll go to a convention. I'll ask a question. I'll say, hey, everybody, how many people here are against universal health care? And all the hands go up. And I say, no, you're not. You're against the mandate that forces it. That's what you're against. You're not against universal health care. If I had a plan that would give everybody health care and it wasn't forced, you'd be for it, right? They go, well, yeah, I would. Thank you. Stop playing the narrative that the left-right gives us when they then begin to call us these bad names, right? Don't jump into it. Instead, accept, you know what? This is what they're saying. Change the premise and say, no, I'm not against universal health care. I'm against the government forcing me to do things. That's what I'm against. I'm against the government forcing you to do things. I'm against the government forcing anybody to do anything. That's what I'm against. If we change that, I think our spirit will come out better. I said in 2016, if we show people our souls, they will want to hear our minds. And that's what we have to do.
A question from another delegate. What departments will a Gray-Sharpe administration first undertake to eliminate?
Well, okay. The president cannot eliminate an agency. The president can eliminate a cabinet official, but cannot. In fact, there's nothing that I am aware of that empowers an agency to be eliminated. What you can do is, like I said, you shine a light on it and show how it's just not fulfilling. We're not getting enough bang for the buck. We're not getting any bang for the buck. Milton Friedman, again my hero, once said, and this would be a positive revolution in our country, we should judge our programs by their success, not their good intentions. If that were to happen and we start shining that light with the sunset provisions, we can eliminate a federal agency if we simply, Congress does not vote for a budget for them. That is the only way it can be done. It can't be done by the president, but we initiate that process. We go through this process of ordering the sunset provisions. Actually, sunset provisions for government regulations would be a good idea as well, but that's the way you do it. So I can't come in here and say, boom, the Bureau of Indian Affairs is gone. Boom, the Department of Education or Department of Health. I can't do that. I don't have that power. But shining that light, using the budget process to show the people so that when we do this, it sounds radical to people. I'm going to eliminate the Department of Education. Okay, it scares people. But if you shine a light on it and show, wait a minute, our educational system nationwide was far better before President Carter instituted the Department of Education, then you show people, not scaring them, but inspiring them, educating them, and showing them it's in our best interest not to have this department around any longer. It can't happen immediately, but give us a year or two and it'll really start happening.
Excellent. Larry?
The audit that I spoke about before is exactly what we're going to do. As we begin to audit and we find exactly what Judge says, we're going to follow Milton Friedman. Is it working? Is it not? As it's not working, we shine a light on it. And when we shine a light on it, then by default, you're going to find that the Congress is going to say, these guys are right. Yeah, we got to get rid of it. We have to defund them. We've got to end them. And they'll begin to end, right? This goes with the deficit. This goes with everything. The judge proposed the audit. I'm on board, Judge. Audit away.
Here's an interesting question, a little tricky here.
Well, at least I can fit one person, Pat.
What's that, boss?
At least I can fit one person.
A tricky question here, Judge. let me see if I can get the gist of it.
Pat,
Yeah.
ask me anything. That's the
Okay. Trying to get my arms around exactly what the intent here. What do you think of Justin Amash's pre-Libertarian Party record? Has it helped or hurt the LP? Is there anything Amash could do that would make you change your mind on supporting his campaign if he gets the nomination?
Well, let me take the last part first. I will support the nominee of the Libertarian Party, if it's Justin Amash or if it's any other candidate. I have some disagreements with all of the candidates, but they're far better than the alternatives of Trump or Biden. So that should answer that. Otherwise, I also have a policy that I don't discuss directly any other candidate. We talk about what Gray Sharpe have done and what we will do. I think that Justin Amash being in this race is a positive thing for the Libertarian Party. It's called, and Larry brought this up, it's BYOP, bring your own press. And he's gotten much more attention for our issues. That's a positive thing. I think Gray Sharpe are the better team, better candidacy. I think we will win the nomination, but we welcome the competition. For Libertarians, we welcome competition from whatever source. Otherwise, I think that he has taken some principled positions. Hooray for him. I applaud that. But as far as the specifics, we talk about what we do and not what the others do or do not do.
Folks, if you're just joining us, you are in fact listening to an AMA, Ask Me Anything, directed primarily at the Libertarian candidate for the nomination for the presidency and the vice presidency, Judge Jim Gray, and of course, Larry Sharpe. If you've got questions, feel free to email them to pford, P-F-O-R-D, at coalitionradio.us, where I'll see them in real time, and I'm asking everything. You send it to me, we'll ask. There's been no hesitancy whatsoever in the last hour or so for either the judge or Mr. Sharpe to take literally any question. Here's one. Larry, do you remember the first time you met Judge Gray?
That is a good question. I think it was 2012. Was it? I was at a convention. My gut tells me no. I'm sorry. It wasn't a convention. It was an event that the Gary Johnson and the judge were doing. Was it New York City? It might have been New York City. I don't remember. Wow, I don't remember exactly, but I think it was not a convention. It was an event that they were doing during the 2012 campaign. I think it was New York City. The judge doesn't remember me because I just shook his hand and walked. So I think it was New York. Judge, did you do an event with Gary Johnson in New York City in 2012?
No, I did several on my own, but Gary and I split up the entire election campaign between the nomination process and the election day itself. But I was in New York several times, and I think that's probably where we met. I think you heard Governor Johnson speak several times as well, but never together.
Yeah, it was 2012, and I think it was at one of the events in New York City, but I actually don't remember, to tell you the truth. I'm sorry, whoever asked that question. I wish I remembered. It was 8 years ago. I apologize.
Well, I'm trying to loop the questions together in categories. Here's another one. What impact did meeting and working closely with Governor Gary Johnson have on your political philosophy and your involvement with the Libertarian Party? Judge?
I first met Governor Gary Johnson when he was still governor of New Mexico, and he came out against our nation's drug policy, and he had a forum within about 3 weeks. I was invited, so I met him on the dais in New Mexico, in Albuquerque. He is my friend. I admire him. Right now, he is training yet again for a bicycle race from Canada to Mexico. I mean, he's an enormous competitor. He's really quite a fellow. Having said that, he didn't change my philosophy particularly at all. We are of common mind, but I arrived at my views such that, some things that he phrased them better, he approached them better, but I don't think he really changed my philosophy. That was changed back before that time.
Okay. Larry, what are your thoughts on
I'm
Gary
obviously
Johnson?
a big fan of Gary Johnson. I love the governor.
Mhm.
I love him because I first heard him speak on TV when he was actually running. I think he was still Republican. I think at the time. I think he was still Republican at the time. I think I'm not sure. It was 2012, and he's the one who I was able to hear because he was talking about normal things. He was speaking like a regular human being. He is the one who taught me what it is to be an instinctual libertarian. Someone who just knows, you know what, that's not right. No, there's something wrong about that. And who's not going to necessarily go back to a book or a philosophy or a person or and say, well, it's not right because of this theory. He just says, no, that doesn't feel right. That's not the way it should be. There's something wrong here. He also got me to really understand the difference of, something has to feel fair, even if it isn't libertarian or if it is libertarian. It's got to feel fair. And I think that was where he was. He also showed me something else in a candidate, that you can disagree, but you can't be dishonest. That if you don't think something's libertarian enough or too libertarian, just don't lie about it. Tell the people, look, I'm not here on this issue. This is not where I am. And that the libertarians can decide if they want to accept that flaw or not. But it isn't a flaw. It's who you are. He repeated the thing that I've heard many times, but he believes it. Don't lie. You don't have to remember things. And I agree. I'm a big fan of Gary Johnson. I love him still to this day. I support him every time. And during 2016, I was on TV more than once defending him, and I would defend him again. I'm a big fan. He helped me to become libertarian. He helped me to join the party. He brought. Some people say, who brought you in? Without Gary Johnson, I may not be a libertarian, but I am now.
Pat, let me also add to that. When Governor Gary Johnson asked me if I would be his running mate for vice president in 2012, after I said I would and said, but only on the condition that we will run to win, which of course he agreed to, then he said something to me that just boggled my mind. And that was, Jim, throughout the election campaign, if you disagree with me, feel free to say so publicly. And I said, boy, Governor, I don't think that Obama said that to Biden or Romney said that to Ryan, but and then he said, of course, but be sure that you're right. But there was that openness, that ask me anything, that feel free to disagree. And then I asked him later about that. Where did that come from? And he said, well, Jim, when I was governor, that's what I told to my cabinet officials, that we're here to do the right thing. And if you have a better answer, then let's explore it. I really admire this fellow.
Let me share a little story if I could real fast, since we're jumping on the Gary Johnson train. When I asked to be Gary Johnson's VP in 2016, he told me that he didn't want me to be his VP. He told me right to my face. He didn't lie to me. He told me, he goes, Larry, we actually sat in a diner in New York City. My daughter was there. And he said, Larry, I don't want you to be my VP. I said, okay, Governor, if you tell me to drop right now, I'll drop. I won't run. This is what he said to me. He said, Larry, no, you should run. You'll raise the bar. That's what the governor said to me. He could have said, Larry, don't run. And I wouldn't have run. I would have walked away right then and there. My daughter was right there. He said, Larry, please run. You'll raise the bar. That's who Gary Johnson is.
Well, again, timing is everything with questions. Will either of you vouch for Hillary Clinton?
No, my name is not Bill Weld.
Oh!
I was appalled. I was appalled when he said that. I dropped my teeth. It was an act of betrayal. And I mean, if he really believes that and stuff, but my goodness sakes, I take it back. That is now the biggest softball question I've been asked. No.
Larry, would you like to add to that? I mean, pile on.
I'm not going to vouch for any Republican or Democrat. Not going to happen.
Excellent. Always remember, folks, if you're listening, that Rhode Island was, in fact, the state that fired Bill Weld. Something that I will take to my political grave. Another question. Judge Gray, will you, in fact, upon your election to the presidency, live in the White House?
Yes. Yes, I would be honored to live in the White House. And my wife would be honored to be the first lady. And my little golden retriever over here, Nixie, would be honored to be the first dog.
Excellent.
Looking forward to it.
Excellent. And Mr. Sharpe, will you follow in the footsteps of the great vice presidents of our age? Spiro
Naval
Agnew.
Observatory?
Spiro Agnew, Dick Cheney. I was thinking more about the undisclosed bunker. Will you, in fact, live in the undisclosed bunker?
Is there an undisclosed bunker? I thought, don't they live at a naval building, don't they? The Naval Observatory, isn't that where the...
That's where they claim to live, Larry. That's where they claim.
Oh, okay. Do they actually live in a bunker?
Yeah,
Fine, I guess I'll live in the bunker, I guess. Sure, why not?
I'm not sure if Dick Cheney realizes that he's not vice president anymore. I don't think anyone's told him.
To be forward, I talked about it when I was running for governor. I might not move. It depends. Whatever makes sense. Whatever the judge tells me to do, I'm in. Let's do it, Judge. Wherever you need me.
I just got another question. Actually, we've got a couple of questions flying across right now. Question for the candidates. What do you see as the best path for the Libertarian Party nationally? Are we better off putting up people with name recognition in the hopes that it will help with ballot access and bring attention to the party? Or should we instead look to only those candidates who are strictly capital L libertarians? Good question.
Well, I'm not going to address the capital L stuff. I think that we have to put in people who are libertarians, who are through and through libertarians, who believe in our goals, believe in our principles, believe in doing everything we can reasonably to get there. So opportunists, I am sorry, we have been taken advantage of by some prior people that we nominated, and I feel badly about that. But I want somebody that's a libertarian that's running. If they've just recently come to the party, that's fine. If they've been in the party for a long time, or even that they came back to the party, that's fine. But I want people that are libertarians in the full sense of the word. Otherwise, we're being used, and we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing in pursuing those principles.
Mr. Sharpe, your thoughts?
Again, I agree with the judge. I think it's totally correct. I don't think it matters how long you've been in the party or not. I don't think that really matters. The question is, you can do both. You can be someone who is popular and be a good libertarian. You can be not so popular and be a good libertarian. You can be all those things, right? The question I have is, and I say this all the time, are you advocating for smaller government and not advocating for bigger government? You're doing that, we're good.
Here's another great question. What is the Gray-Sharpe stance on climate change and other environmental issues?
That's a really important question, and one that has been footballed around like crazy. Look, it's a complicated issue. I believe that it's clear that mankind being on the earth has contributed to what we call global warming. Ask your thermometer. Now, whether it's cyclical or not, I'm not smart enough to know, but that's not really the issue. The issue really is it's a cost-benefit analysis. It's clear that we could reduce global warming to some degree by stopping all automobile traffic in our country, to not burn any fuels anywhere. But how much of a difference it's going to make for global warming issues as opposed to ruining our economy? So it's a cost-benefit analysis. If we need to understand that the countries of China and India, for example, are putting in still coal burning plants for churning electricity. They are contributing so much more to carbon in the air than we are. So let's figure out what the benefit is and what the cost is and adjust accordingly. And by the way, the private sector is much more effective usually at accomplishing those goals than is the government. I've interviewed also people on my show with regard to the Nature Conservancy. They're working with fishermen, for example, to reduce the overfishing in areas, because the fishermen then start seeing, wait a minute, if I do this, we'll be able to perpetuate my craft. So it's the private sector that's far more successful, almost always, than the government sector. So let's make that a combination.
Larry, what do you think?
The judge is saying he wants to decentralize. He doesn't want to have a centralized control structure, which I think is the answer, right? Centralized control has gotten us where we are now. But if we do invite, the nonprofit world, and if we invite the private market, and if we invite all of those people in to find the right answers, how in the world could any of us know what's going to make the most impact in any given environment, any given culture, any given part of the world or part of the economy? There's no way the individual could know. But when we're all on the same page, providing actual leadership, you'll find that the local communities will do better each and every time, right? We decide we're going to ban straws. Was that the best thing to do? Right? I mean, the way I can tell you that if that was the best thing to do, and maybe it was for the environment, I have no idea, but why would we want to make that heavy-handed? Why wouldn't we simply say, you know what? Let the individual companies, let the individual people in the area decide to make that happen. Well, Larry, that will never happen. It is happening. Look at veganism. Veganism is exploding. It's voluntarily people deciding to not eat meat. There's no government rule you can't eat meat. People are deciding. They're saying that they believe that farming is a massive contributor to global warming. I mean, sorry, I shouldn't say farming, animal husbandry. Animal husbandry is a huge contributor to global warming. They're saying that, and people are choosing to not eat meat because of it. We are seeing it happen without government force. All we need is leadership on issues like that. What's the right answer? How do we fix it? And you will watch people voluntarily do the right thing. We just need leadership.
The questions keep flying in.
Let me follow up
Go ahead,
on that too, if we make a moment, because if you advertise that, look, I manufacture biodegradable straws, and the people that use them say, hey, come to my market, come to my hamburger shop, because we have biodegradable straws, then people will be more likely to go there. And it's the same thing, really, with regard to the animal industry, the meat industry, because now you'll see, wait a minute, the people that are involved in raising cattle are seeing a lowering of their sales. So now they're putting tents over the cattle to grab the methane and turning that into fuel. That's what works. It's the market, it's the purchasers. I don't want to spend money for something that's causing damage to the community, to the atmosphere. So you advertise that you're not. That's what works. We're all in favor of a cleaner life
I'll give you another example in New York City. I mean, remember years ago when Bloomberg decided that he was going to make sure no one could have a soda more than 16 ounces?
Yes,
he was going to make it by mandate, by fiat. No one could have it, right? Well, the funny part is his science was accurate. There's no doubt it was. If you give people smaller cans of soda over time, statistically, people will drink less soda. That's a fact, and we probably should be drinking less soda as a society. Absolutely true. And him using his heavy-handed method made it a joke. People were fighting against him. They were getting big gulps. Everything was going wrong. If he instead used government the way we should, which is as a repository for information, and said, look, I have this data. It's good data. It's good. It does work. What would have happened? Restaurants, exactly what a judge said. Restaurants would have said, hey, I'm only going to give you 16 ounces or 12 ounces of soda because I love you. We're a healthy, conscious store. And people would have gone there. And it would have been a marketing tool. And people would have started doing that. How do we know that? What's happening now? Look at soda manufacturers now. What are they putting out? Smaller cans. It's just taken literally 20 years because it had to go past the joke stage. If he had done it up front and just said it, companies would have reacted already, and people would be having smaller sodas and drinking less sugary drinks, which is a good thing for the vast majority of our people. We want to be drinking less. That's true. We do want to drink less sugary drinks. That's true. We should drink less of them. But it doesn't matter. The fact is, we would have done it voluntarily. It would become a thing faster if government doesn't use the heavy hand and instead use the bully pulpit. And to the judge's point, the market will begin to show what works, and people will follow.
I'm having fun, Pat. Can I add one more thing?
Absolutely.
Look,
don't hold
in
back.
California, ask me anything. In California, the People's Republic of California, we lovingly call it, that the government has now mandated that if you're going to put in a new house or apartments bigger than a certain amount, you have to put these solar panels on your roof. Okay, good idea. Let's come back to Milton Friedman. Let's judge them by the results, not their good intentions. It adds another $10,000 onto the to the house, and then it freezes people into a technology. Maybe they don't want them yet, but they have to have this. But eventually then the technology will stop because there's no market anymore because everybody bought the old technology. So as a result, you stifle new technology and you freeze people at something that isn't going to be as good as it would be 2 or 3 years from now when they'll be convinced on their own. Hey, that's a good idea. That's a money saver. I want it saving the economy. So you just intrude into the market, and central planning just doesn't work. It's arbitrary. It doesn't work. It sounds good. Now listen to Milton Friedman again. Let's judge it by its results, not its good intentions.
I've got to jump in for a second and add my own soda story. The finest root beer on the planet is manufactured here locally by a company called Yacht Club Soda, yachtclubsoda.com, owned for 107 years privately, currently owned by a family who are wonderful libertarians, while they're constantly working around the clock in the dreaded private sector. Government, of course, chooses to weaponize their tax system against a company like this, which is salt of the earth. Taxpayer, community member, donate soda for any type of event imaginable. Again, government uses its power of taxation as a weapon. In the conversation that was held in front of the state Senate, I had the opportunity to testify. And the folks that got on there from the variety of tin pot banging, we're going to make your decisions for you, vein of life, talked about how in the advent of a soda tax in Philadelphia that, soda consumption had dropped something like 45 to 47% in Philadelphia. Now, of course, facts be damned. That's an effective tool. Until we got an opportunity to testify, and libertarians are big on facts, we pointed out that soda sales in the surrounding communities had gone up over 50%. All they've ever done with their efforts when they weaponize government is to simply play government whack-a-mole, move the target from one to the other. The free market ultimately is the authority by which determines all of our commercial relationships. China, speaking of free markets, the term constructive engagement.
Pat, I don't mean to be a nudge, Pat. I have to run. I apologize, guys. I've got to get out of here. I've got to bail. I have a couple things I have to grab to do this evening. I do have a family. I apologize. I've got to run. The judge is still here. I got to run.
Well, on that note,
Thanks,
thank you. Let's ask one last question to the judge, and then we'll give him the opportunity to make a closing statement. Your philosophy on China with constructive engagement. We've seen our China policy lurch back and forth now for a generation. The Bush administration, of course, pushed constructive engagement, which was to turn a soft eye to the harsh abuses, if you will, of Chinese policies, both foreign and domestic, while at the same time encouraging trade. Now, of course, the pendulum has swung completely in the other direction, and we've got a president who's advocating for tax increases for American citizens in the form of tariffs. Your thoughts on the situation, Judge, and how would you approach China? Much like Lieberland?
Okay, feel free. First of all, I believe in free trade. I will go back to our Constitution, Pat, and say that the founders were really smart because they did not allow one state to put up trade barriers with another state. So if North Carolina could not put up a trade embargo or tariffs on goods from Maryland, today it's easier for the United States to trade to China as it was back then for Maryland to trade with North Carolina. Look what it would have done to our country had they put up those trade barriers. I believe in free trade. Having said that, China is cheating. China is not a part of the world community. They are stealing our technology. They are not honoring contracts and intellectual property and the rest of that. So what you do is, and I don't know what the backroom negotiations are with the Trump administration because I'm not privy to that, but you do it publicly. You say, wait a minute, sport fans, China is cheating. They're treating their people abominably. They have, these places where they have people incarcerated all over the place. We're going to not deal with them. The world community should not deal with them as long as they continue to cheat, and call attention to that so that people will stop buying Chinese goods. If they know that they're cheating, they'll stop buying the Chinese goods. We're not going to put a tariff on there, but the marketplace, the purchasers don't like cheating either. They don't like people that treat their people abominably. basically what, as my understanding, you can do almost anything you want to in China or in Vietnam for that matter, except criticize the government. They have an open freewheeling system, but they're not playing by world standards. So you call that to the attention of the world community will respond both as a system of we're going to call this attention, and the purchasers will simply look and say, well, that's made in China, they're cheating, I don't want to buy their products. And that's the way you do it.
Okay. Judge, let's it's been a great hour and a half, incredibly enough. Look how quickly the time has flown. First of all, I'd like to thank all of the folks who contributed questions. They were all outstanding, on point, issues based, politically motivated, politically focused questions of all varieties. Thank you for taking the time to participate this evening, and thank you for joining us on the coalition. Judge, there's only incredibly enough, we're looking at a week or two before the actual convention, the election.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it really has. The year has flown by. It's been a remarkable year for libertarian candidates, and you were on our show here just a few short weeks ago, and I mentioned at the time, I think we were both in agreement that this represents, in my lifetime, I believe, the finest group of libertarian candidates running for the presidency. Just some outstanding people. Again, differences in opinions, but if take this moment, if you will, to address the folks in Region 8, because this will be on replay. Give them a shout out, and also give them an opportunity to hear sort of a synopsis, what the presidency of a Judge Jim Gray means.
Indeed. I've been proud to be able to be your libertarian candidate for vice president 2012. It was quite a responsibility, and I was very deeply humbled and appreciative of that. I seek your vote for a president of the United States as the libertarian nominee. I believe that we are the unifying candidates. In today's world, we're so polarized, and in many ways, we're a little polarized with regard to libertarian politics as well. I believe Gray Sharpe 2020 will be unifying. We'll be presenting a campaign that, again, will make you proud, that you will be able to take this campaign, take who we are, what our background is. We're known quantities. We're libertarians through and through. We have the credentials, the background, and the actions to prove it. I've been trying to normalize, trying to mainstream the word libertarian. I've done that with my books. I've written for, 5 years now, a blog called 2 Paragraphs for Liberty. Remember that word, 2 Paragraphs for Liberty. And then I turned the more substantive ones into a book called 2 Paragraphs for Liberty, Solutions that are practical, effective, responsible, libertarian, trying to just mainstream that. My podcast as well, All Rise the Libertarian Way with Judge Jim Gray. We will be able to make progress. We will be able to change the culture. That's what we need to do. We don't need to scare people. We need to inspire them. Gray Sharpe will inspire them. I've written more, probably than any presidential candidate from any party in our history, even more than James Madison about these things. 4 books, 2 musicals, blogs, even law review articles, etc. I believe in these things. I have no plausible deniability pretty much about anything because I've already written about them. It's there. I believe them through and through. So we need to get this word out. We need to help our down ballot candidates and be able to show the world what libertarian culture would do. I wrote something called One Man's Libertarian White Paper. It's on our website, www.graysharpe2020.com. It's also on my website, personal, judgejimgray.com. Shows what a libertarian world would look like. Thomas Jefferson, talk about a leader, talk about a prototypical libertarian. He wrote that, I don't care if you worship one God, 20 gods, or no God. It doesn't pick my pocket and it doesn't break my leg. You talk to people, they will understand that. Sure, that makes sense. Live and let live, the personification. That's what we do. We'll bring a unification in this polarized age. We give people a third voice. I don't know, it might even be a first voice. Choosing between Trump on the one hand and what he is, and Biden on the other hand. I believe in some things that Trump has done. We will incorporate them, but without all of the other stuff that goes with it. We will bring unity to our country. Americans United, graysharpe2020.com. It's been a pleasure to share thoughts with you, Pat. And let me ask you one question.
Sure.
It's probably the biggest play on words that I've ever heard of. But what do you call when you mix an elephant and a rhinoceros? I know this has been on your mind, but what do you get when you mix an elephant and a rhinoceros? And of course, the answer is elephino. At any rate, I'll leave you with that. But life is good, Pat. It's been a pleasure to share times with you yet again, and look forward to doing it again. The idea AMA, ask me anything, is totally libertarian. You won't see it from any other political party. It's a pleasure to be with you, and nobody could have been more blessed than to have had Larry Sharpe say, yes, I will be your running mate, because he's a really Mr. Libertarian man. I'm proud that he's my friend, proud that he's my running mate. We're going to do you proud.
Well, I too would like to thank everyone for joining us tonight. Editorial note, this platform remains open to all libertarians, and particularly to all libertarian candidates of any stripe, of any race, of any state, of any region, of any caucus. I invite all of you to join me, whether before the convention, throughout the summer, or in the run-up to November, and utilize this as a tool to disseminate your message and to grow the liberty movement, of which the Libertarian Party is the most important, the most fundamental part of. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage-porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here at CoalitionRadioNetwork.com, Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course the mothership at CoalitionRadioNetwork.com. Folks, if you have a moment tonight, if you could follow us or like us or share us, we'd be grateful. Independent media relies on social media as a way to rise above the white noise, the madness that is out there today. We're grateful that you took the time to join us tonight. We hope to see you again soon. Have a wonderful evening. Please stay safe.